What I'm about to reveal to you today is genuinely scary. Not horror movie scary, but the reverential awe of a person who suddenly discovers they have been holding the most powerful tool in existence between their hands, and they never knew how to use it. Because Psalm 23 is not what they told you it was. It's not just a prayer of comfort. It's not just a beautiful text read at funerals or framed on your grandmother's wall. Psalm 23, when read in its original Hebrew language, verse by verse, contains a Kabbalistic code for activating abundance so powerful that the ancient rabbis recited it before any business deal. They whispered it before any transaction, before any act that involved the flow of money. You see, for 3,000 years, the majority of humanity has been reciting these words without understanding what they are actually activating. The sages of the Kabbalah teach that Hebrew letters are not just characters on a page. They are channels of divine light. Each letter has a numerical value, a geometric shape, and a highly specific vibratory frequency. To recite Psalm 23 in its original language is like opening 23 floodgates in a spiritual dam. And what a millionaire rabbi revealed to a desperate woman in the back room of a dying bakery changed not only her financial situation, but her entire understanding of the verse everyone repeats without actually comprehending: "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Today, I am going to tell you that story, and when you finish listening, you will never read Psalm 23 the same way again. In the dead of winter in 2008, during the height of the Great Recession, a 48-year-old woman opened the doors of her bakery every single morning at 4:30 a.m. The place smelled of sourdough, warm butter, and the memories of 3 generations. Her name was Grace. She had the broad, strong hands of someone who had been kneading dough since she was 14 years old. Her hair was tied back under a white cap that was already yellowing from the intense heat of the oven, and she had a way of moving through the kitchen that was more of a dance than actual work. She knew every corner of that bakery with her eyes closed. She knew exactly what temperature the oven needed to be for every type of bread. She knew how many minutes each dough needed to rise. She knew the exact moment to pull the signature rolls out, so they had that golden color her customers called perfect. The bakery was called Hope. It was founded by her Italian grandfather in 1952, using a brick oven and a bread recipe he brought from Naples in a flour-stained notebook. Then her father took over, and finally, Grace. 3 generations of hands covered in flour, holding up the exact same tradition. But hope was dying, not all at once, but slowly. The way things die when people love them, but the world no longer supports them. Massive supermarket chains had open bakery sections with prices that were impossible to match. They sold industrial bread, produced in factories where machines never sleep, and where the cost of each piece was a tiny fraction of what it cost to make artisanal bread with human hands in a brick oven. The customers who used to come every day now came twice a week, then once, and then they stopped coming altogether, not for a lack of affection, but for a lack of money. The economy was shaking from the effects of the crash. People counted every dollar, and a dollar saved on bread was a dollar used for something else. Grace tried to compensate by working harder. She started waking up earlier at 3:30 a.m. instead of 4:30 a.m. In the total darkness of the apartment she had above the shop, she would walk down the wooden stairs that creaked with every step, turn on the kitchen lights and start kneading while the city was still asleep. She went to sleep later. At 11 p.m. she was finishing cleaning the kitchen floor on her hands and knees with a brush because she could no longer afford the cleaning service she used to have. Step by step, she reduced the staff. First, it was the cashier, a young girl who cried when Grace told her she couldn't keep paying her. Then it was the delivery boy, and finally, Grace had to fire Ray, her assistant of 10 years. Ray had started as a teenager. Grace taught him how to knead, how to bake, how to recognize when the dough is ready just by touching it. He was like a son to her, a son who now had to leave because the bakery couldn't support 2 salaries. Ray cried when Grace gave him the news in the back room on a Friday afternoon. Grace cried too when she locked the door behind him and found herself completely alone among the sacks of flour, listening to Ray's footsteps fade away down the street. Now she did everything alone, kneading at 4 a.m. with arms that ached from her shoulder to her wrist, baking alone, tending the counter alone, running from the kitchen to the register every time the door chime rang, cleaning alone, counting alone, closing alone, and when she closed, when she pulled down the metal shutter with that heavy sound that felt like the end of something, she would sit in the back room between the flour sacks and the empty trays and count what she had made that day. It was never enough. The $7,000 monthly rent that the landlord refused to lower, the $3,000 electricity bill that skyrocketed in the winter, the gas for the oven, the biggest expense of all, because without gas there is no fire, and without fire there is no bread. The flour, which had gone up in price 3 times in the last year, the butter, the yeast, the eggs, the taxes. Every month the equation was negative, and every month Grace took from her personal savings to cover the difference, the savings her father left her when he died 5 years ago, the money that Don Eduardo had amassed during 40 years of work, dollar by dollar, roll by roll. Money that was now vanishing like flour blown off the counter when you leave the door open. What Grace said to herself every night in that back room was what was destroying her without her even knowing it. While she counted the coins on the stainless steel table, her mind repeated the same phrases with the cadence of an inverted prayer. This is over. The bakery is going to close. I'm the last generation, and I'm the one who loses it. My grandfather is rolling in his grave. I am not capable of saving what he built. Listen to me very carefully. Every phrase was a decree. Every decree was a precise instruction to the universe. And the universe, obedient as always, organized reality to confirm exactly what Grace declared every night among the flour sacks. Grace's first attempt to save herself was lowering the prices. If the supermarket sold a loaf of bread for $2, she sold it for $1.50. She lost her profit margin, but hoped to maintain volume. It worked for 1 week. The customers returned, but the vanished profit margin collected its debt at the end of the month when the gas bill arrived and there was nothing to pay it with. Selling cheaper wasn't the solution. It was commercial suicide disguised as a strategy. Her second attempt was diversifying. She started making custom cakes, empanadas, and pizzas to go. The cakes were good, But Grace was only one person doing the work of four. Every hour she dedicated to cakes was an hour she didn't dedicate to bread, and without bread, the bakery stopped being a bakery. Her lifelong customers complained. Grace, where are the signature rolls? She was losing her essence by trying to be something she wasn't. Her third attempt was asking God. One night, after closing, Grace sat on a small wooden stool next to the still warm oven and prayed. She prayed the Our Father. She prayed a Hail Mary. She prayed with her eyes closed and her flour-covered hands clasped in front of her chest. She begged God to save the bakery, to send her customers, to stop the hemorrhage of money, to not let what her grandfather built die. She prayed for 20 minutes. Then she opened her eyes. The oven was still warm, the trays were still empty, and the feeling of emptiness was still there. Nothing had changed. The next day, she sold even less than the day before. I know YouTube videos rarely ask this, but if you've made it this far into the story and you haven't subscribed yet, please take a second to do so. I pour my time into researching, writing, and narrating these deep spiritual truths for you, and your support means more than you can imagine. Thank you. Let's continue. The encounter happened on a Thursday afternoon. Grace was behind the counter when a man she had never seen before walked in. He was short, robust, and dressed in a dark suit with no tie. He wore a black kippah and a neatly trimmed gray beard. He had the small, vibrant eyes of someone who observes much more than he speaks. He ordered a half-dozen signature rolls. Grace put them in a brown paper bag. The man paid, took a bite of a roll right there, standing at the counter. He chewed slowly, closed his eyes for a second, opened them, and said with an accent that mixed deep city grit with something much older, "This bread has a soul." Grace smiled with sadness. It has a soul, but not many customers anymore. She didn't know why she said it. She never told her customers her problems. But something in the calm of this man lowered her defenses, as if she were standing in front of someone who wasn't going to judge her. The man looked at her with an attention that Grace recognized. The attention of someone who sees past the counter, past the flour, past the dark circles under her eyes. "May I sit for a moment?" Grace pointed to the back room. They sat among the sacks of flour on two wooden stools. The man placed the bag of rolls on a sack and spoke. "My name is Rabbi Menachem. I have a small community 3 blocks from here. I walk down this street every Thursday, but I had never entered. Today, something told me to come in. I don't know what, but I learned many years ago not to question those voices." He paused. "You are suffering with this business." It wasn't a question. Grace nodded without speaking. "Let me ask you something," he said. "Do you know Psalm 23? Grace almost laughed. "Of course. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I know it by heart." The rabbi nodded. "You know it by heart in English, but you do not know it. There is a massive difference between repeating translated words and understanding what those words do in their original language." Grace looked at him confused. The rabbi leaned forward, his voice lowering into a serious, academic tone. "Psalm 23 is not a prayer of comfort. It is an activation code. Every verse in Hebrew contains a specific frequency that activates a concrete spiritual function. The sages of the Kabbalah knew this. They didn't read it to feel good. They read it to activate the Shefa, the flow of divine abundance in specific situations of financial blockage, of scarcity, of stagnation. Let me explain to you verse by verse what it actually says and what it actually does, the rabbi began. The first verse, Adonai roi lo esar. You translate it as, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But in Hebrew, the word roi comes from the root that means to feed, to nourish, to provide. And the word esar doesn't just mean to lack. It means to lack what is essential. What the verse actually says is, the infinite source nourishes me. I cannot lack what is essential. It is not a wish. It is a declaration of state. When you say it in Hebrew, you are declaring that the flow of provision is active over you. And the human brain, when it hears that declaration repeated with faith, changes its frequency. It shifts from the frequency of I lack to the frequency of I am nourished. That internal shift is what opens the channel where the Shefa comes down. Grace listened without blinking. The second verse, he continued, Binot deshe yarbitsini, alme menujot yenahalini. In green pastures he makes me lie down, beside still waters he leads me. This is not a pretty postcard. It is an instruction of rest. The Shefa does not flow toward someone who is in a state of panic. It flows toward whoever rests, whoever trusts, whoever lets go. The green pasture represents the trust that provision exists, even if your eyes cannot see it yet. When you recite this in Hebrew, you are ordering your nervous system to calm down, to stop operating in survival mode. Because in survival mode, everything contracts, the body, the mind, the vessel. And a contracted vessel cannot receive abundance. The rabbi paused, letting the weight of the words settle. The third verse, Nafshi Yeshovev. He restores my soul. Here is the most potent Kabbalistic key. The word Yeshovev means to restore, to return to the original state. What is the original state of the soul? Abundance, fullness, connection to the source. The soul is not poor. It was born connected to the infinite flow. What disconnected it were your decrees of scarcity, inherited beliefs, accumulated fears. This verse is an order of restoration. You are telling the universe, return my soul to its original frequency, cleanse it of what others put on it. Grace felt as if every verse was opening a door in her chest she didn't know she had. The fourth verse, Gam ki elej bege tzalmavet lo irara. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. This is the verse of fear, the real fear. The fear of losing the business, the fear of not being able to pay, the fear of failing those who came before you. But look at what it says. It does not say the valley doesn't exist. It says you walk through it without fear. It doesn't eliminate the circumstance. It eliminates the fear of the circumstance. And when the fear leaves, the channel opens, because fear closes the vessel so tightly that nothing can enter. The rabbi stared directly into her eyes. And the fifth verse is the one that changes everything in 24 hours. Taroch lefane shulhan neged zorarai. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Listen to me well, Grace. This verse does not say that your problems disappear. It says that the table is prepared in front of you while the problems are still there. Abundance does not arrive after the problems are solved. It arrives while they exist. The table is served in the presence of your debts, in the presence of your fear. The Shefa does not wait for everything to be okay to flow. It flows now, in the middle of the chaos, but only if you declare that the table is served. Only if you assume the provision is already here, even if your eyes see empty flour sacks and unsold trays. Grace had tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of the immense relief of someone who finally understands something that was always right in front of them. The final verse, the rabbi concluded, Ach tov v'jesed yirdefuni. Goodness and mercy shall pursue me. The key word is yirdefuni, to pursue. It doesn't say goodness will accompany me. It says it will pursue me with the urgency of a hunter, with the insistence of someone who will not stop until they find you. Abundance does not walk slowly toward you. It hunts you down, but it can only catch you when you stop running in the opposite direction, and you run every time you decree scarcity. Stop running, stand still, and let what has been chasing you finally catch you. He gave her one final instruction. Tonight, before you sleep, recite Psalm 23 entirely. In Hebrew, phonetics. You don't need to know the language. The letters are channels of energy. Recite it once with your eyes closed. Stay in silence for 2 minutes and then say one single phrase. Tarosh lefane shulhan. Prepare a table before me. Do it tonight and tomorrow. Observe what happens. That night, Grace closed the bakery at 8 p.m. She went up to her apartment, sat on her bed, took out the piece of paper where she had written down the phonetic Hebrew the rabbi dictated, and recited it slowly. She stumbled over the syllables, mispronouncing half the words, but speaking them with the trembling voice of a woman who had spent her whole life praying in English and was now, for the first time, hearing the original words leave her own mouth. Adonai ro'i lo ejsar. The phrase resonated in her chest in a way the English translation never had. It felt heavier, older, more real, as if the Hebrew words had roots that reached down to the core of the earth. She finished reciting. She stayed in silence for 2 minutes, the most difficult 2 minutes, because the silence invited the fear and the list of debts to enter. But Grace breathed in and said the final phrase, Taroch lefane shulhan, prepare a table before me. She said it with her eyes closed, with her hands still smelling of flour, with the absolute faith of someone who has nothing to lose. She slept deeper than she had in months, as if a massive weight had been lifted from her chest. At 4:30 a.m. the next morning, Grace opened the bakery, turned on the oven, and baked the rolls. She opened the counter at 7 a.m. At 7:10 a.m., a woman Grace didn't know walked in. She was well-dressed, carrying a briefcase. She introduced herself as a corporate event organizer. A downtown firm needed breakfast catering for a 3-day convention. 120 people. Bread, pastries, coffee. Could the bakery handle it? Grace felt the floor move beneath her feet. 120 people for 3 days. It was the biggest order in the history of Hope Bakery. The old Grace would have said, "I can't do it alone. It's too much." The new Grace, the one who had activated the code the night before, looked her in the eye and said, "Yes, count on me." She called Ray, the assistant she had fired. She asked if he could come back for 3 days. Ray said yes, without hesitating. They worked together like the old days. The oven didn't shut off for 3 days. The rolls came out perfect. The organizer paid her in full on the 3rd day. The check was more than Grace had made in the last 2 months combined. She looked at the check with trembling hands, looked up, and whispered, "Tayarach lefane shulhan, you prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies." While the debts were still there, while the massive supermarket was still selling cheap bread next door, the table was served. The organizer recommended her to 3 more companies, a law firm, an HR consulting agency, and a small publishing house. Word of mouth did what no advertising could, because word of mouth is earned with soul, with a product that has history, that has hands behind it, that has 3 generations of flour on its knuckles. In 2 months, Grace had weekly catering contracts. She rehired Ray permanently. When she called him, Ray was silent for 10 seconds, then said with a broken voice, "I'll be there tomorrow at 4 a.m. And he was. Hope Bakery didn't just survive, it resurrected. Not by competing on price with the supermarket. That war was lost from the start. It resurrected by competing on soul and tradition. The supermarket sold bread. Hope sold belonging. What Grace discovered was not a magic trick. It was not superstition. It was a frequency. The river of Shefa, the infinite flow of wealth, never stopped flowing over Grace, and it has never stopped flowing over you. It flows over every single person who feels that abundance is avoiding them. What is missing is opening the floodgates, and the floodgates are opened with the correct syllables, pronounced with faith. God does not evaluate your phonetic perfection. He evaluates your heart. Tonight, I am asking you to do something concrete. Search for the phonetic pronunciation of Psalm 23 in Hebrew. You don't need to be Jewish, you don't need to be religious, and you don't need permission from any institution. The letters are universal. The Shefa does not ask for your nationality or your bank account balance before it flows. It only asks if your vessel is open. Recite it once with your eyes closed, slowly, without rushing. Let each syllable vibrate in your mouth, even if your mind doesn't understand it. Your soul understands. Your soul recognizes the words because your soul was created with the same letters that make up Psalm 23. Then stay in silence for 2 real minutes. No phone, no distractions, and say the final phrase, Tarok lefanai shulhan, prepare a table before me. Say it with an open chest, with the faith of Grace in the back room, with the authority of King David writing in a cave. Do it tonight and tomorrow. Observe. Don't look for a miracle with the desperate eyes of someone who needs to see to believe. Observe with the consciousness of someone who knows that something shifted in the invisible worlds, and the visible world is about to reflect it. Watch what door opens, what call arrives, what person appears. The table is already being prepared. It was being prepared before you even clicked on this video. You were just too busy counting your coins in fear to realize that the banquet was already served. Adonai rohi lo eshar. The source nourishes you, you cannot lack. Say it, believe it, and let the table be prepared. Because right now, as you listen to my voice, the table already has your name on it.